Dr. Elias Carter sat in his small office aboard the diplomatic space station, Horizon 7, staring at the message on his holoscreen. It was an invitation, an official one, from Vashira of the Xelari Dominion. The Xelari were a mysterious race, their tall, slender bodies covered in shimmering blue scales. They were known for their intelligence, their technology, and most importantly, their strict isolation. They rarely invited outsiders to their homeworld. In fact, in over 200 years of contact, only a handful of humans had ever set foot on Xelera Prime. And now, out of nowhere, a personal invitation had arrived for him. Elias rubbed his chin. Why him? He was a xenolinguist and cultural analyst, not a high-ranking diplomat. Yes, he had studied the Xelari language for years and written papers on their society, but that hardly made him special. The message was polite, almost too polite. Dr. Carter, it would be an honor if you would accept my invitation to visit my home on Xelera Prime. There is much we can learn from each other. Vashira was a noblewoman, one of the most influential figures in the Dominion. But what did she want to learn from him? The human embassy on Horizon 7 was cautious. Ambassador Reynolds called him into her office and gave him a hard stare. This is highly unusual, Carter. She folded her arms. The Xelari don't invite humans for casual visits. If you accept, you'll be the first human to visit their capital in over 50 years. I know. Elias tapped the armrest of his chair. But isn't that a reason to go? This could be an incredible opportunity to understand their culture. Reynolds sighed. Or you could be walking into a trap. Elias considered that. The Xelari weren't known for violence, but they weren't exactly friendly either. They operated on a level of intelligence far beyond most species. If they wanted something from him, they wouldn't ask. They'd orchestrate events to ensure they got it. I'll be careful, Elias finally said. Reynolds nodded. We'll be monitoring you. If anything feels off, say the word, and we'll get you out. 2 days later, Elias stood aboard a Xelari diplomatic vessel, watching as the blue and silver planet of Xelera Prime came into view. It was breathtaking. Massive crystal-like spires stretching toward the sky. Glowing rivers of bioluminescent liquid carving through the landscape. The moment he stepped off the ship, he felt it. Something wasn't right. Vashira greeted him with a warm, practiced smile. Welcome, my dear friend. Her voice was kind, her golden eyes unreadable. Elias smiled back, but in his gut, a quiet voice whispered, "This is not just a visit. She has a plan for you." As Elias Carter stepped onto the polished crystal floor of the Xelari spaceport, he felt small. The architecture around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive towers of shimmering blue and silver, floating platforms that moved on invisible energy, and translucent bridges stretching across glowing rivers below. Everything seemed delicate, yet powerful. Xelari citizens moved gracefully through the spaceport, their tall, slender forms covered in elegant robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Their golden eyes flicked toward him, observing him with silent curiosity. He wasn't just a guest here. He was a spectacle. Vashira stood beside him, smiling. "I hope your journey was comfortable." Elias nodded. "Very comfortable." "Your ship was impressive." Vashira chuckled, a soft, melodic sound. Xelari technology values precision and elegance, much like our culture. She gestured toward a waiting transport pod, its surface smooth and silver, like liquid mercury. "Come, I will take you to my home." Elias hesitated for half a second before stepping inside. The moment he entered, the door sealed with a whisper, and the pod lifted off the ground without a single sound. Outside, the city of Xelera Prime spread before him. Floating gardens hung between the towers, glowing vines wrapped around massive spires, and flocks of strange, translucent creatures soared through the sky. "Your world is beautiful," Elias admitted. Vashira nodded, her golden eyes unreadable. "Yes, but beauty is not enough to survive in the universe, is it?" Before he could ask what she meant, The pod arrived at a vast estate, perched atop a glowing waterfall. The entrance was guarded by Xilari in dark, ceremonial armor, their faces emotionless. Something about them made Elias uneasy. Were they guards? Or something else? Inside, the palace was a marvel of impossible design. Walls that shifted color as he passed, a ceiling that mimicked a living sky, and corridors that twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible. Vashira led him to a grand dining hall where an elaborate feast had been prepared. The table was filled with dishes of exotic fruits, delicate crystal-like meats, and glowing blue liquids that pulsed like they were alive. "A banquet in your honor," Vashira said. "Eat, drink. You are most welcome here." Elias sat down, but as he reached for a piece of fruit, he noticed something odd. The food was human-friendly. Every dish had been carefully prepared for him. His stomach tightened. How did they know what he could eat? Vashira watched him with a quiet smile. "Eat, Dr. Carter. You are our honored guest." Elias picked up the fruit but didn't take a bite. Something was wrong. He wasn't just a guest here. He was being studied. Elias Carter sat at the grand dining table, surrounded by dishes of exotic food. The room was quiet, too quiet. Dozens of golden eyes watched him, waiting for him to eat. He could feel their curiosity, their intensity. He picked up a piece of crystal-like fruit, its surface shimmering under the soft glow of floating lights. It looked harmless, but his instincts screamed at him. How did they know exactly what he could eat? He took a small bite. The fruit melted in his mouth, sweet and refreshing. Around him, the Xilari nobles exchanged subtle glances. Were they expecting something? Vashira smiled. "Delicious, isn't it?" Elias nodded but said nothing. Servants poured a glowing blue liquid into a delicate silver cup. Vashira lifted hers in a toast. "To new understandings between our species." Elias hesitated before raising his own cup. He brought it close to his lips but didn't drink. Instead, he pretended to take a sip, letting the liquid touch his lips without swallowing. If they were testing him, he wouldn't make it easy. The conversation around the table was polite but controlled. The Xilari spoke of philosophy, art, and history, but never war, never conflict. It was as if they were avoiding those topics on purpose. As the feast continued, Elias noticed something else. Small, almost invisible devices floating near the ceiling. Scanners. They were analyzing him. Every movement, every reaction. A Xilari scholar leaned forward. "Dr. Carter, may I ask something?" Elias turned to him. "Of course." The scholar's golden eyes gleamed. "Humans are unique. Your species is not the strongest, not the fastest, yet you have survived against impossible odds. You have defeated empires stronger than your own. How?" The room fell silent. Elias put down his fork. So this was it, the real reason for his invitation. "We adapt," he said carefully. "We learn, we change, and we fight when we must." The scholar nodded, as if confirming something. Across the table, Vashira watched him closely, her fingers tapping lightly on the table's surface. They weren't just studying his biology. They were studying his mind. Elias decided to push back. "Tell me, why am I truly here?" Vashira smiled, but there was something cold in her expression. "Because, dear Elias, you fascinate us." The way she said it sent a chill down his spine. The feast continued, but Elias had lost his appetite. This wasn't just a dinner. It was an experiment, and he was the test subject. Elias Carter lay awake in the luxurious chamber given to him. The bed was soft, the air smelled of strange flowers, and the walls glowed with a soft, calming light. It was perfect, too perfect. He turned onto his side, staring at the ceiling. The Xilari had been polite, even welcoming, but something was wrong. They were watching him, studying him. The way they observed his every move at dinner, the way Vashira answered his questions without really saying anything, it all felt like an act. Elias had spent years studying alien cultures. He knew when someone was hiding the truth. His eyes flickered to the door. It wasn't locked. Strange. If they were trying to keep him here, why give him freedom to move? Unless they wanted to see what he would do. Taking a deep breath, Elias got up, moving silently across the room. He stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The palace was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No guards, no patrols, just endless corridors of shimmering walls. He walked cautiously, turning corners, memorizing his path. Then he saw it, a door different from the others. It was larger, its surface dark and smooth, as if trying to hide something behind it. Curiosity burned inside him. If the Xilari had secrets, they would be here. Elias pressed his hand against the door. It didn't budge. A control panel beside it blinked with strange symbols. Xilari language. He had studied it for years, enough to understand basic commands. His fingers danced over the screen, guessing at the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft hiss. The door slid open. Elias stepped inside and froze. The room was massive, its walls covered in glowing holograms. But these weren't just artistic displays. They were battle records. Images flickered, humans fighting against alien empires, outnumbered but winning. Wars where humanity had survived through sheer willpower, clever tactics, and unbreakable spirit. The Battle of Epsilon Prime, the Siege of Titan, even classified conflicts that no alien should know about. Elias's heartbeat quickened. Why were the Xilari studying human warfare? Then he noticed something else, a row of stasis pods lining the far wall. His stomach twisted. He stepped closer. Inside one of the pods was a human. A real, living human. Elias staggered back. This wasn't just a research room. This was a lab. An experiment. A soft voice echoed behind him. You weren't supposed to see this. Elias spun around. Vashira stood in the doorway, her golden eyes unreadable. His hands curled into fists. What are you doing here, Vashira? She smiled, but this time there was no warmth. The real question, Elias, is, what are you willing to do for the truth? His blood ran cold. He wasn't just a guest. He was a test subject. And now he had a choice. Run or find out what game the Xilari were really playing. Elias Carter's heart pounded as he faced Vashira. Behind him, the stasis pods hummed softly, their eerie blue light reflecting off the walls. A human was inside one of them. Alive. What is this, Vashira? Elias demanded, his voice firm. Why is there a human in that pod? Vashira stepped into the room, her golden eyes calm, almost amused. I told you, Elias. You fascinate us. Elias clenched his fists. That's not an answer. She sighed, tilting her head. Very well. You deserve the truth. She gestured toward the holograms on the walls, scenes of human victories, impossible battles won against overwhelming odds. Your kind should not have survived. You should not have won. Elias narrowed his eyes. And yet, we did. Vashira nodded. Yes, again and again. Against stronger, more advanced species. Against empires that had ruled for thousands of years. Humanity is different. She walked toward one of the holograms, watching a replay of the Siege of Titan, where a small human fleet had outmaneuvered a technologically superior enemy. The Xilari are intelligent. We have knowledge, technology, strategy. But we lack something your kind has. She turned to face him. Instinct, survival at all costs. The ability to adapt, to fight, to endure. Elias swallowed. You're studying us, trying to understand what makes us different. Vashira smiled. Not just studying. She motioned toward the stasis pods. We are searching for a way to become more like you. Elias took a step back. You want to turn the Xilari into humans. Not entirely. Vashira's voice was smooth, controlled. We want to take the best of you, your instincts, your resilience, and combine it with our intelligence and technology. Elias shook his head. That's not how it works. You can't just take what makes us human and put it in yourselves. Vashira studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that made his blood run cold. Perhaps not, but we can extract it. Elias stiffened. Extract it. His mind raced. Were they experimenting on humans? Trying to transfer something from human minds into auxiliary brains? You brought me here to be part of this experiment. His voice was quieter now, but filled with anger. Vashira didn't deny it. We needed someone special. Elias glanced at the pod again. How many others had been taken before him? How many had disappeared into the auxiliary search for power? He looked back at Vashira, his body tense. And if I refuse? Vashira smiled, but this time there was something sharp in her expression. You won't. Elias knew then. He wasn't just a guest. He was a prisoner. And if he wanted to leave Silara Prime alive, he had to act fast. Elias Carter felt his heartbeat thunder in his ears. He was trapped. Vashira stood before him, calm and composed, as if she had already won. You see, Elias, this is an opportunity. For you, for us. If we understand your kind fully, we can evolve beyond our limits. Elias clenched his fists. You're not asking for understanding. You're trying to steal something that can't be taken. Vashira tilted her head, amused. Perhaps. But we must try. His mind raced. Think, Elias. You need a way out. His eyes flicked toward the stasis pods. The human inside. Who were they? How long had they been here? Were they still alive? Vashira noticed his gaze. That one is special, like you. He was resistant. But in time, he will help us unlock humanity's secrets. Elias forced himself to remain calm. You won't get what you want from me. Vashira smiled. We shall see. She pressed a button on a sleek console, and suddenly, a strange energy field surrounded the room's exit. A prison. Elias exhaled slowly. No way out. Not yet. He needed to act smart. He had to play along for now. Fine, he said, forcing his voice to be steady. If you want me to cooperate, then I need to understand everything. No more half-truths. Vashira's golden eyes gleamed. Good. I knew you would see reason. She turned toward the holograms, deactivating the security field. Come, let me show you how we intend to evolve. Elias followed her, his body tense. He had no intention of staying. He needed to find a way to escape this place, free the human in the stasis pod, and warn Earth. But for that, he had to wait for the right moment. And when it came, he had to strike fast. Elias Carter walked beside Vashira, his mind working fast. He had to escape. But how? Vashira led him down a corridor, past walls that shimmered like liquid metal. If he tried to run now, he wouldn't get far. The auxiliary were watching him. He had to wait for the right moment. They entered another chamber. The air inside was cold, almost sterile. Elias's breath caught in his throat as he saw more stasis pods, dozens of them. Each pod contained a human. Some were unconscious, their faces peaceful. Others twitched slightly, as if caught in a dream. How many had they taken? Vashira gestured to the pods. These are the ones who came before you. Some were soldiers, others scientists. Each was chosen because they represented the best of humanity. Elias felt sick. You kidnapped them. Vashira sighed. Kidnapping is such a crude word. We are learning. We must evolve. Elias clenched his fists. No more waiting. He had to act now. Glancing around, he spotted a control panel beside the pods. If he could access it, maybe he could free the prisoners. But first, he needed a distraction. Elias turned to Vashira. You want to understand humans. He took a slow step closer. Then let me show you something important. Vashira raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what is that? Elias moved fast. Before she could react, He grabbed a small device from her belt and slammed it against the control panel. The room flashed red as an alarm blared. The pod started opening. Vashira's eyes widened. "What have you done?" Elias didn't answer. He rushed to the nearest pod, helping a groggy man step out. "Can you walk?" he asked. The man nodded weakly. Who are you?" "No time to explain. We're getting out of here." Vashira recovered quickly. Her voice turned cold. "You won't escape, Elias." Elias ignored her. The other pods were opening. Humans were waking up, confused but alive. Now, they just had to fight their way out. The alarms blared, red lights flashing across the chamber. Elias Carter had done it. He had freed the prisoners. But now, they had to fight their way out. Vashira stood near the control panel, her golden eyes sharp with anger. "You are making a mistake, Elias." Elias didn't care. This was his only chance. The freed prisoners were weak, struggling to stand after so much time in stasis. But they were human, and humans didn't give up. A auxiliary guard rushed into the room, a sleek energy weapon in hand. Elias reacted instantly, lunging forward and slamming his fist into the alien's throat. The guard staggered back, gasping for air. Elias grabbed the weapon and turned it on the others. "Everyone, move," he shouted. The freed prisoners stumbled forward, supporting each other. Some of them had military training. Elias could see it in their movements. Good. They'd need every bit of strength to escape. More guards arrived, weapons raised. The air filled with the crackling hum of energy blasts. Elias dove behind a console, firing back. A soldier beside him, a young woman with a scar across her cheek, grabbed a fallen guard's weapon. "What's the plan?" she asked, breathing heavily. Elias gritted his teeth. "We get out of this palace, find a ship, and make sure they never do this again." The woman nodded. "Then let's give them hell." The battle intensified. Humans and Silari clashed in the corridors. Elias led the charge, pushing forward with everything he had. Vashira watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she stepped back into the shadows. Elias saw her leave. She wasn't giving up. She was planning something. But right now, he couldn't worry about that. Right now, he had to survive. Elias Carter led the escapees down the long, metallic corridor, their footsteps echoing as alarms blared around them. They were close, so close. Behind them, Silari guards pursued, their sleek energy weapons firing bright blue blasts. Each shot sizzled through the air, missing by inches. "Keep moving," Elias shouted. He turned and fired back, hitting one of the guards in the shoulder. The alien collapsed, groaning. The others weren't as lucky. One of the escaped prisoners stumbled, too weak to run. A young soldier grabbed his arm, dragging him forward. No one was getting left behind. Elias's mind raced. They needed a ship. Without one, escaping the palace meant nothing. This way, he spotted a wide set of doors ahead. A hangar. The group pushed through, emerging into a massive docking bay. Sleek, curved auxiliary ships lined the platform, their silver hulls gleaming under artificial light. Elias scanned the room. Which one could they fly? Then he saw it. A human-designed shuttle at the far end. A stolen Earth ship. Perfect. There. He pointed. Move fast. The group sprinted toward it. But then, Vashira appeared. She stood on the platform between them and the ship, her golden eyes calm. Not a single guard stood beside her. Elias raised his stolen weapon, his breathing heavy. "Step aside, Vashira." She tilted her head. "You don't understand, Elias. I'm not your enemy." Elias clenched his jaw. "You kidnapped us, experimented on us." Vashira's gaze didn't waver, and yet, "I let you escape this far." That made Elias hesitate. Why hadn't she stopped them earlier? Why was she alone now? "What do you want, Vashira?" he asked carefully. She exhaled slowly. "A trade." Elias narrowed his eyes. What kind of trade? Vashura's voice was steady. Take me with you. For a moment, silence filled the hangar. The other humans looked at each other in shock. Elias stared at her. Why? She took a step forward. Because I want to learn, Elias. But not like this. She glanced back toward the palace. The Xelari won't stop trying to change themselves. But I want to see what it truly means to be human. Elias studied her face. Was this a trick? A trap? Behind him, the guards were closing in. They didn't have time to argue. Elias made a decision. Fine, but if you betray us, I'll end you myself. Vashura gave a small, knowing smile. Understood. Without another word, they rushed onto the ship. The engines roared to life. Now, all that was left was getting off this planet alive. The stolen Earth shuttle trembled as its engines roared to life. Elias Carter gripped the controls, his heart pounding. Behind him, the freed prisoners strapped themselves in, their faces tense. This was it, the final moment. Outside, the Xelari guards rushed into the hangar, their weapons raised. They couldn't let the humans leave. Hold on, Elias shouted. The ship lifted off the platform, its thrusters burning bright. Blaster fire rained down, striking the hull, but the ship's shields held. Vashura stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the screens. She was helping him. Flight path is clear, she said, but they'll send fighters after us. Elias gritted his teeth. Not if we're faster. He pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot out of the hangar like a comet, breaking through Xelari airspace. But just as Vashura predicted, enemy ships appeared on their radar. Sleek, silver Xelari fighters launched from the palace, their engines glowing like stars. They're gaining, the scared soldier shouted. Elias's hands moved fast over the controls. He wasn't a pilot, but he had trained with the best. The enemy ships opened fire. Energy blasts streaked past them, close enough to shake the cabin. Elias swerved hard to the left, avoiding a direct hit. The ship's alarms blared. Vashura studied the screen. We have one chance. There's a debris field near the planet's orbit. If we reach it, they won't be able to follow. Elias nodded. Coordinates. She tapped the console. Locked in. He didn't hesitate. The shuttle dove toward the debris field, twisting and turning to avoid enemy fire. The Xelari fighters followed, but their sleek designs weren't built for maneuvering through tight spaces. One by one, they crashed against the floating wreckage. Explosions lit up space behind them. Elias let out a breath. We did it. A cheer erupted from the crew, but Elias didn't relax. Not yet. They weren't safe until they were far away from Xelora Prime. Vashura turned to him. Set a course for the nearest human colony. I will help you avoid Xelari patrols. Elias studied her. Could he really trust her? She had helped them escape, but she had also been part of the enemy. Had she truly switched sides? For now, he had no choice. He nodded. Fine, but you're under my watch. Vashura smiled slightly. Of course. Elias activated the hyperdrive. The stars stretched before them. Earth was waiting. But as they vanished into the void, he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning.